Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Robert Williams, and I'm the head of business and partnerships here at SandboxAQ. Really excited to have an insightful discussion around data protection, encryption, post-quantum cryptography. Obviously, this landscape is evolving. There's new threat vectors. There's new conversations being had around the market. So I couldn't think of anybody better to talk to than my fellow expert here, Mr. Tom Patterson, the global leader of CyberNext at Accenture Security. Tom, would you mind taking a few minutes to introduce yourself and what brings you here today?
Thanks, Robert. It's great to always talk about this subject, but also enjoy talking with you and Sandbox around the world at key venues around the world. This is a subject that is near and dear to both of our hearts and becoming more and more relevant for our clients around the world. As you mentioned, I'm the global lead at Accenture for what we call CyberNext. So within the security world, there's lots of things that are here and now and doing that. And Accenture is the world leader in providing cybersecurity to clients around the world. But we also are always looking ahead. We're always looking at what's coming next. 10 years ago, we were working on artificial intelligence, which allowed us to jump right out of the box and graduate artificial intelligence into a full-blown security offering around the world. The focus now within CyberNext is around post-quantum security, encryption management, where our clients are going. We've seen the need to change the way enterprises use encryption around the world. We've seen it becoming drastically different, and we think we're going to end this decade with a very different view of the importance of managing cryptography. So we're thrilled as Accenture Security to have partnered with SandboxAQ globally to really bring your technology as a key component of how we walk our clients through their quantum security journeys in every industry, in almost every country now. There's government mandates and there's individual regulatory drivers, as well as just companies understanding the new risks that are out there and the new ways that they have to mitigate them. So within our CyberNext team, we do, like I said, AI started, quantum is now, and with cryptography as our focus. Right behind that, we have space and robots and all sorts of other things that we're always looking at in terms of what's coming forward. But really happy to be here talking with you today around the importance of cryptography, what we're seeing with our clients in terms of their journey. It started with looking at the new crypto risk that comes from quantum computers that are right around the corner, but it's really blossomed into a much more fulsome discussion around cryptography management overall and where our clients are going. So really look forward to having a discussion around it because there's a lot that can be done today, as I'm sure we'll talk about.
Absolutely, Tom. So you hit on a couple things I definitely want to unpack here. So obviously, our customers are dealing with all types of issues to their data. When they think about their assets, other than their people, it's probably data that's a very close second in terms of what's critical to their success. 66% of organizations dealing with ransomware attacks. What are some of the new challenges that they're seeing, some of the new mandates that are coming down from industries? How does that intersect with cryptography?
So you're absolutely right. The focus with Accenture Security and with our clients is really around data. We talk about AI. AI is great, but AI is nothing without data. Data is what drives the company. We used to say data is the new oil, but it's even well beyond that. Data is everything when it comes to our clients, and protecting it and making use of it. You don't want to protect it by throwing it into a box and locking it up and never being able to deal with it. You've got to protect it in ways that it can still be shared, it can still be analyzed, it can still be leveraged along all your ecosystem partners, along with your clients. In order to do that, you need cryptography to really step up its game. The way we used to do cryptography in the world is gone. It's back with the buggy whips. The way we do cryptography going forward is vastly different. It's not more expensive. It's not harder, but it is different. And so coming to grips with that change earlier rather than later is really what we're helping our clients go through now, is really understanding that from a strategic perspective. We work with the boards, we work with the CIOs, we work with the business leaders before we even get to the security teams. because the security teams have to implement it, but this is a sea change when it comes to cryptography. We're starting to see drivers from countries, starting to see drivers from industries. We're soon, we're starting to see the beginnings of regulations, and we expect to see more of those coming in the future. And they're focused on cryptography. Make better use of it, make it work better for you. And this is something where technology really does come to the rescue. There's a lot of good advantages from companies like yourself that barely existed 5 years ago, that now are going to become super important for the coming decades, because you can't just manage it, your cryptography in a spreadsheet. You can't just do it the old-fashioned way of, oh, don't worry, I buy it from company X, so they'll take care of it for me. There's so much to do now with cryptography, and it becomes such a positive, it becomes such an enabler for business when you can start to look at being able to share even more things without the same risk that you had even when you kept it in your vault. So really exciting time to be ahead. NIST specifically, just this, the past 6 months has come out not only with new cryptographic standards, which were 10 years in the making, but they've also come out now with dates and times certain for when they want us to start deprecating the old encryption, the old RSA algorithms and the other elliptic curve algorithms and things that are the bulk of the way we encrypt our data traffic today. They're saying now start to figure out your plans to wind those down, because you need to start using not just one new one, but many new ones to come. So really exciting time. We're looking at August of 2024. New standards came out, and in November of 2024, they already came out with deprecation dates of starting to deprecate by 2030. So by the end of this decade, you need to have found a way to wind down your vulnerable encryption, replace it with new, and that is a job. Again, it doesn't require magic. It doesn't require a forklift to come in and change everything, but it does require a change in the way you look at your crypto estate. And we really like the use of technology to make that efficient and orchestrated and managed, and do it in a way that it's part of 5-year plans. It's part of the other programs as you're doing multi-cloud changes, as you're doing zero trust efforts, as you're doing IAM efforts. All these programs that are already being worked on can be done with an eye towards doing your cryptography better. And so that's really the exciting time to be here now. The message from every government and from every agency, and even from the sectors, is start now. And we want to help make sure everyone knows what that means to them. And 2 easy words, start now. But what does that really mean? And hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that today, Robert.
Absolutely, Tom. So you hit on a couple of things. One is manual and spreadsheets and things like that. To some extent, organizations think about cryptography as maybe like water or electricity. It should just kind of be there, right? And when I have to think about it, maybe I'll pull together a spreadsheet and aggregate some information. This sounds like a really big transition. I know this isn't the first time they've had to do cryptography and encryption standard transitions. A, why should they think about this as something to do now? And then B, how can we in the 21st century think about leveraging technology and automation versus spreadsheets?
Yeah, the why now question, Robert, is first and foremost in almost every board meeting that I go to and brief on. It's why should we do this now? We've got other things, other fish to fry. We've got ransomware. Haven't you heard? We've got all this. AI's coming. Haven't you heard? Why should we look at this now? And so we do learn from history. I'm old enough to have gone through the last big change in the world from a cryptographic standard was when we were all reliant on the data encryption standard, or DES. That was the standard. That's the way every banking transaction worked, and that's the way every file was encrypted. We used DES. It was the data encryption standard. It was it. And as it was it, traditional computers started to get faster and faster and faster. We started to see pretty soon they're going to be fast enough to crack DES. So what should we do? And there were 2 lines of thought. There were the people that were holding on dearly to DES that said, well, what if we use triple DES? And what if we use DES and then we redid DES and we redid DES, and we need even a bigger computer? And the people that went down that path just wasted their time. You can't stop technology's evolution. These technology is great. The enterprises are great. The people that are building this and designing this and rolling it out, you can't stop that march of technological progress. So the computers got faster and faster, faster than the DES could be doubled and tripled up. So the other thing that happened was we asked the National Bureau of Standards at the time, now NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, to come up with a different math problem that was a one that would resist even the fastest computers that could ever be built, ever be conceived of. And so they, after 10 years of work looking at it, they came up with what became known as the Advanced Encryption Standard. So 10 years to come up with the new one. And then it took about 10 years for enterprises to find all their old DES chips and DES algorithms and then replace them with this new AES, or Advanced Encryption Standard. And that's where we are today. So we know it took 20 years, 10 to come up with the new thing, and then another 10 to get it promulgated throughout the entire ecosystem. And I will tell you, Robert, that was when days were simpler in crypto days. There was one algorithm old, one algorithm new. It went into certain places, and yes, you had to go get to them. Put in every ATM machine. I remember going to ATM machines around the world, pulling out chips and popping in new chips because they needed to be up to regulatory code, and that was the only way to do it, was one by one by one. Now, however, these new encryption algorithms that we're replacing with the RSA algorithms for the public key crypto, it's everywhere. It's in our phones. It's in the web browser you're watching this video through. It's in everything we do. We no longer have castles and moats as our security system. Enterprises are all highly interconnected. Everything's about touching other people. There's clouds, and there's SaaS providers, and there's third-party products, and there's clients that are on their phones and on their laptops everywhere in the world. All of that is regulated by public key encryption. So it's absolutely everywhere. And all of that has to change, because now the good news is NIST has been working on the new standards for the last 10 years. And as I mentioned, now in August of 2024, has finally announced the first batch of new standards that will resist even a quantum computing attack, and pushing that out. But finding all that encryption, we know it's in there somewhere. We know we buy, easy. We get this from Microsoft, we get that from IBM, or we get this from this big provider. That's great. But that turns out not to be not even half of where you use encryption, and where your partners use your encryption, and where your providers use encryption. So all of that encryption needs to be found, needs to be discovered, and then you need to create an inventory so you know where your vulnerabilities are before you can then go to the next step and start mitigating those threats and managing your crypto in a much better state. So that's where industries are today, is really finding that, doing that discovery and finding it all. So the reason we're starting now is because we know last time it took 10 years and things were simpler there. This time around, it's much more complex use of cryptography, but this time around, there's tools. Now there's automation. Now there's orchestration. Now there's ways to go out and find it that's not brute force. It's not taking all of your cyber workforce and saying, stop what you're doing and go hunt for crypto algorithms in all of our applications and all of our routers and all of our clouds and all of our third parties, all that stuff. You can't do it that way. And that's what took 10 years last time. Now there's automation, and that's where it's still not a snap of the fingers and it's done in an instant. But it does need to get started now, so that you are there before the regulations hit. You are there before your existing algorithms get deprecated by NIST. And you are there before your business stops being able to communicate with the rest of the world, because they're all making the change at the same time you are. So you're going to do it. And there's a lot of benefits, a lot of commercial benefits, as well as risk reduction benefits to starting early and starting now.
Thank you for that, Tom. So there's probably no shortage of certainly risks in the environment, and also the way to implement something like a risk assessment. So this sounds like a really big project. How should our listeners think about the risk discovery, and how has Accenture in particular thought about it, both for internal use and then how you're thinking about bringing it to your clients?
Yeah, and security people, and I would imagine most of the people watching this video are security centric people. We're all risk driven people. We all are here not for the technology and the whiz bang and the gizmos and gadgets, but for risk. We want to see the risk. We want to mitigate the risk. That's what we do, and honestly, why we do it. So looking at this problem of cryptography changes from a risk perspective is absolutely the right way to go. We start when we go out and do an engagement with any of our clients, and Accenture clients are some of the biggest, most important organizations in the world. A lot of them are the early adopters for seeing risk mitigation requirements and getting out there ahead of things. So we are lucky enough to have a lot of experience on the ground with clients actually going through this process. None of them so far have had a vice president of cryptography that knew their risk. None of them knew where it was or what was at risk. They made assumptions, but all of them needed help. So a structured, organized way, we created a cyber or security risk analysis compendium best practices for just looking at these new changes, these new risks to cryptography and what's going to have to change. And then going through that process, on a risk basis. So, everybody, most organizations, they'll encrypt everything these days. They'll encrypt the lunch menu, and no one's going to care. No one's going to steal that, and hold on to it and try and crack that later. But there's a lot of really valuable data, and there's a lot of really valuable connections that continuity of operations becomes absolutely critical from a risk perspective. So going through in an automated way, and again, that's where the ActiveGuard tools that Sandbox makes this a lot easier for our clients, is to go in and start to see in an organized risk-based way, not only what encryption is there, but what it's used for, what its meaning is. So we're able to now, using your tools, very quickly ingest a lot of data that our clients already had, quite honestly. They just never looked at it that way. They never used it that way. It was there. It was left over in PCAP files, or it was unused output from Splunk scans. And there was a lot of data available. It just wasn't being ingested right. It wasn't being analyzed right from a risk perspective, looking at how we're going to do cryptography. And make no mistake about it, we're moving forward towards an era where organizations around the world are going to have a cryptographic center of excellence. They're going to have a senior vice president of cryptography whose job it is not just to make it continue to work, but leverage cryptography, use the right algorithms in the right places at the right time with the right partners, the right level of risk. That is an absolute sea change as we go through with these clients. And so helping them find that, starting at the risk, starting at, well, you have a risk analysis. Now you have to deprecate all these algorithms and have a plan for that. What's your plan? Going through that from a risk basis, where to start? Do we do the least risky things first, or we do the most risky things first? Obviously, but no one's thought about that. Those plans don't exist, and they need to be made. And so that's where we love working with Sandbox, both your tools and your people, quite honestly, on our key clients around the world, because we can streamline that. We can bring that process down from what used to be years, now down to weeks, to get these things going. So it's a really big difference that technology brings to this fight. And it's a fight that everyone's going to have to go through. It's a change that every organization in the world is going to go through over the rest of this decade. And the earlier you start, the more benefits will accrue.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. Not only a couple of the points you made, but kind of thinking through our engagement so far together over the last few months, I think two things stand out. One is just the fact that you briefly hit on it, the fact that our ability to ingest data and learn from other parts of the environment, because we know that our CISOs, our security experts, there's a lot of data points, a lot of alerts, a lot of tools that are on their network. So how are we ensuring that they're giving me a single pane of glass and one source of truth? And then B, how do we make sure that it's relatively straightforward to integrate this into their environment? The other thing is that, I was going to say the other quick thing is that the industries we're working on together, and then I want to get a little bit more of your feedback here. We're doing obviously a lot of work on the banks and telcos and governments. We're working in other industries like life sciences, like fintech. So we'd love just your thoughts in general, and then also on these new industries we're serving.
Yeah, so you hit a couple of words that I think are really important. I didn't want them to get past without people focusing on a couple of those keywords. So ingest is one of the words. And then single pane of glass, I guess that's multiple words, but a second phrase. Let me just hit on those two because they're really important. So, and they're related. So ingesting what already is there has turned out to be a huge advantage for our clients around the world. Nobody wants to do more work if it's not necessary. They're looking for technology to be labor saving, not labor adding. And so helping our clients ingest what they already have has been absolutely vital. Give them a quick look. I mean, like I said, in a month, they can start to get a feeling for what their risk looks like, what their inventory is going to end up having to be, and get those initial early snapshots. And we do a lot of that through ingesting it and then using your tools to turn that into a useful inventory system. So it's not just some big flat file and another big PCAP file to look at, but it's really a useful format that can then drive the next stage in the process, which is actually remediating and making use of the newer algorithms where necessary. So ingesting is a key word that encourage all of our people watching this to really focus on what can be learned from things that they already have, files they already have, and scanners that they already have. The second is single pane of glass, and I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, I don't want another single pane of glass, and I just want one single pane of glass. But this isn't really that. I mean, the way they have it, the data that they have today isn't ready for a single pane of glass. No one's pulled it out and made a single pane of glass ready. So that post-processing that your software does with ActiveGuard really gets it to the point where it can be put into either your single pane of glass or most commonly the company's other single panes of glass that they already have. But converting it, making it useful has become the real value add here, especially in the first year of working with clients on this together. Finding that ability to take raw data that they have and a single pane of glass that they already have, but connecting those two is what the ActiveGuard does so well, and where our Accenture security teams around the world have been doing this. Now you mentioned different sectors. Governments is always first movers. I'd say almost every one of our government clients around the world has a program to update their cryptography for whatever reason. Financial services is always the first non-governmental sector in terms of adopting security. And once again, they are here. I think, interestingly, one of the reasons they got on this so quickly, even earlier than security people were pushing them to, is because they were already into quantum computing, looking for business advantage using quantum computers. So they were the first organizations that really understood the risks from these quantum attacks that are coming. They understood they had their own views on timelines of when this is going to be necessary and important. So they got on this boat very quickly. We both work very closely with groups like Financial Services ISAC, which is it's come out for multiple years now with really strong not only recommendations but guidelines. Download this white paper, do this first, do that second, do this third. This is where your peers are. This is where you should be by this year. This is where you should be by next year. That kind of guidance from the sectors has been really important. Now we're seeing it. We're very active in the telco space with cryptography, which makes sense. It's providing a lot of that kind of connective tissue for all of our organizations around the world. So they want to be on top of the game. But life sciences, anybody that's got real intellectual property, the most valuable data to protect, as well as the ones that are most linked towards connectivity, that are part of that global economy. I don't know how many $14 trillion a day that get sent over, electronic means or whatever the current number is. That's all encrypted data, and it's all got to be encrypted the same way, or at least in a way that is compatible with the receiving party and the sending party. That's not guaranteed if everyone in the world's going through this process now to find their old encryption that's vulnerable and replace it with new encryption that's less vulnerable. So doing that in an orchestrated way, in an organized way, working together at Accenture Security, we have a program for, for our quantum security ecosystems that's driving a lot of this change, just to get companies to start talking to each other, to get them going around, how do you work together, and what are you going to do for the change? How are you going to mitigate this? What algorithms are you going to use, and when and where? And so getting, companies to that point in a safe and secure way, it does require the early start, and the early start is always predicated with creating that inventory, doing your own discovery work, and not expecting it to just be there, and not expecting that one of your third parties, whoever you buy your operating system from or ever buy your cloud from, is just going to do it for you. We haven't met a single client yet. We've done this all over the world in almost every sector now at Accenture. Nobody has known where more than 50% of the vulnerabilities lie from cryptography. And so there's just a step-by-step process. Got to go through all the applications that are there, and they're written in a wide variety, as you well know, Robert, because we push your teams to continue to add more connectors and ingesters to your software every day. But a wide variety of technologies are used, programming languages that most people think are long dead still have encryption in them and still need to be scanned and still need to be discovered. So all of that has to happen. And the earlier you start, the better, cheaper, and faster the result is.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, to your point, there's a lot to go do across just understanding these risks with data in transit, at rest, in the cloud. It's great that we've built this joint capability to help customers get started. But it sounds like there's a lot to unpack here. What's literally the next step that you think that a customer should take here?
Well, first, I think having that internal discussion with your own organization about, hey, are we looking at this? This is a new risk. This is a change. There's new standards now. There's a deprecation order coming now from NIST. We need to get our arms around this. Now, it's not for a couple of years. It won't hit. But we're being told that it's going to take us at least a couple of years to figure this all out and make the change in an organized way. Are we looking at this? Do we have a program? Have we set aside, budget for this? Have we assigned it to certain people? Is it being built into our 5-year plan? So we stop doing more harm and we stop buying things that are going to need to be fixed later. Those kind of internal discussions need to happen. There's a lot of good strategies that are open source now and best practices driven based on industry, based on country that you're in. And certainly we have a very active program to get strategies going in as little as 4 to 6 weeks. But the next step is to really start thinking about doing that discovery, coming up with your discovery plan. And again, we recommend leveraging technology wherever you can. I think we've got set up on both our websites, easy to go to find links to get started with us. But however you get started, the watchword here is start now. Don't wait till the end of this decade till you see those headlines in the papers saying that some adversary can just destroy all of your business because they can break all of your encryption that you use to process, to keep secrets, to talk to your partners, to talk to your clients. All that can be put at risk by a third party. And so you want to make sure that you've done the steps you're going to take anyway. You want to make sure you've done them before that headline hits. You want to make sure you're ahead of these regulations that we see are coming. We're already seeing DORA in Europe talking about making sure you don't use encryption that is now known to be obsolete. Now there's deprecation orders, so RSA falls into that. So we expect to see more of that, and getting started now. We'd love to be able to help anybody that's out there between our two companies at Accenture and Sandbox. But again, wherever you want to get started, please get started early.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Anything else you want to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
No, just that, our relationship, Robert, has been really strong. We've been working together for years, and it really helped you create this space and evolve this industry. We're thrilled that your tool set continues to evolve quarter after quarter after quarter. There's more and more features that help our clients. We're working, Sandbox's name is SandboxAQ. So we're really pushing the boundaries of leveraging the efficiencies of adding artificial intelligence to this game, both on the ingest side and on the post-processing side. And so working together has really been wonderful for both of us, and to the benefit of our customers. We've got people on both sides of the table here that can take a call, can talk to experts. There's no reason to try and Google your way through a plan as important as this. This is really something where experts that have been there, that have done this many, many times in companies that look like yours, or organizations that look like yours, that work in countries wherever you are, that know this, and having those early conversations that can help you figure out what your timing should be, what your roadmap should be, what your budget should be, what your partner should be. We're here to help. We'd love to help. And this is why CyberNext took on quantum as our next big thing, is because that's the driver for this cryptography, and how we really are helping the clients around the world get to where they're going to end up this decade with with the Cryptographic Center of Excellence, with a senior vice president of cryptography, and with a really smart, proactive, orchestrated management of cryptography that builds business and builds value and builds growth, rather than just as a sucker on it. So really excited to be here. Hope everybody takes advantage of the links that we put at the end of this video, and thrilled to work with you and Sandbox.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thanks to the entire global Accenture security team for the continued partnership. And we're looking forward to speaking with people on this as a next step.
Thank you.
Thank you.